Hi, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where you always learn something new. I am joined today by my good friend from Scotland. She lives in England now, Lesley Price. She's with www.learnappeal.org.uk. Go take a look at it. You can also get there with learnappeal.com. It'll redirect. But take a look at that website. They do a wonderful job, and you talk about remote learning. We're going to talk about that today. Remote learning. They're doing that right now in places that they have no real internet. So it's really quite fascinating what can be done and is being done. Also joining us is Harold Muliati. He's usually off camera, but today he's on camera. He's going to join us to talk about this subject and other stuff. He's running the video switcher and mixer as well. And we have no guests today, just ourselves. Here we go. And we are back, and the COVID virus has made the Western world completely insane. Just saying. But as a result, a lot of companies all of a sudden are jumping into online learning. We need online learning. We need remote workers. We need this. We need that. That's good. But I believe, Lesley, you've had experience with remote workers and working remote yourself. So have we. We've had a remote staff for the last almost 20 something years. We're used to remote staffs. And as people who've had remote staffs, we can tell you it is not all beautiful and pink and wonderful. There's a lot of issues with remote workers, and not everyone can be a remote worker. So for all these people rushing to get 1,000 people out the door remotely, be warned. People that need a lot of supervision in an office or other environment will have no supervision remotely. It's going to be hard to find people. We've had cases where remote people were not locatable, whether it was an instructional designer or a programmer. Where are they? And you don't know until way late, maybe at night, and then they show up and they do nothing that day. You have no idea what's going on. And those are the people, by the way, who don't last in the remote world. But Lesley, what's your experience been with remote, not only for yourself, but for others that you've worked with?
I think the biggest challenge is making the assumption, and I always say, Rick, to assume makes an ass out of you and me, but making the assumption that it is exactly the same. It's not.
No.
And the skills that are required, both from the people who are managing the remote workers and the skills required from the remote workers, slightly different skills. Some of the skills are exactly the same. They still need the same skills for their jobs to do their jobs.
For example,
but they also need different skills. And probably one of the biggest, most important things is trust. And I'm talking about trust on both sides of the equation. So not just trust from the manager, but trust also from the person who is working remotely.
That's a really good point. That's not one of the things I was thinking of, but you're right. That is such an important point, because without trust, you have nothing. And but one thing you need in terms of other skills beside trust, I would say you need better communication skills than ever. Because if you're not communicating with each other, you're dead. It's not going to happen, both sides. And the other thing is discipline. You have to be disciplined in order to work remotely, because the distractions at home are going to be a lot bigger than at work many times.
Especially at I don't know what in the US, but in the UK they've made an announcement that all the schools are going to be closed.
Same thing.
Apart from the kids who are children of key workers, the schools are going to be closed. Therefore, many parents are going to be working from home and looking after children at the same time. And how, and that then also, I did it when my children were young. And you also then have to do is you need to have trust and discipline and all these kind of things and routine schedules
Yes.
children so that you understand them and so do your children. And that's hard.
It's very hard. And you've got many times now double working parents who one may be at work now, maybe not. It depends on what their positions are, what they do. It's hard enough to raise a kid when you're not working. When now you're at work and the kid's not in school and you have to be at home with them. And we're not talking now for a week or two, maybe some local illness, typical mumps, measles, whatever. We're talking 3, 4, 5 months. Some people are talking a year. They're nuts. I'm sorry. I think that's one of the stupidest decisions ever made. Kids catch everything anyway, and their immune systems are growing and they're pretty strong. And this particular virus is really affecting mostly older people and mostly over 80s. So it's an interesting. It's a to me it's a typical reaction of a politician without many clues as to what really goes on in the real world. They're worried about votes. They're worried about how they look, how they appear, and no, I don't think this is a fake virus. I think it's a virus, but so far it doesn't look like anything we've talked about, and the numbers of people who've been affected are much less than the regular flu. And there's also another thing. With this virus, supposedly it's been around since October, November in the rest of the world. Most people don't know it because it's a mild flu. So we're overreacting in some big, big ways. And they were talking in the U.S., we may have 20% unemployment by the time. 20%. That is higher than the Great Depression. It's not good.
Yeah.
And England, you guys have shut down, like in London, for example, supposedly nobody's going to work anymore. They're all at home. They can't go out. I don't know if they're stopping people and forcing them back home. They haven't done that here yet, at least in most places, but they're talking about it.
Not yet. And one of the industry, I mean, apart from the travel industry, which is also, is obviously of big concern.
Yep, devastating.
One of the, hospitality and catering is one of, I don't know about I mean, obviously I've visited the US many a time, and I see, how many restaurants, how many cafes, how many bars, and these are the lifeblood of not only socializing within communities, but they provide a huge amount of employment.
Yes.
Locally, where I live, we just got an email round today saying that our local shop, one of the local shops, has closed, and it's a local shop that is associated with a hospice. So it's a charity shop. So they've actually closed a charity shop.
Yeah. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
To me, I just, and yet I went out today for lunch with my daughter, and where we were in the restaurant we were in, they had actually reset out the tables. So instead of the tables all being close together, they had actually moved them. So yes, I was obviously near my daughter, but if anybody had come down and sat next to us, they would have been the required 2 meters away. The lady who was serving us was very polite, very charming, but she was also being very polite, very charming, very helpful, but she was doing it at a distance. She wasn't in your face. She wasn't, they were, and when we went in there, we could see that people had just left and they were doing a thorough clean of the table where the people were sitting at. Now, that's probably cleaner than my house is at the moment.
And you have a pretty clean house. So, You know,
Yeah,
it's a
you've
little,
been
it's a little
here.
ridiculous because one, I don't know if you agree with this, but I would say in today's day and age, 80 or maybe more percent of the population knows nothing about science. So they believe anything
I would
anybody
agree.
tells them. They know nothing about science. They don't know anything about epidemiology and germs and biology, nothing. So they come up with these ideas that frankly make no sense. You can go to the supermarket, but you can't go out to eat. What's the difference? You can go here, but you can't go there. If you're going to keep up with these ridiculous rules, then it would be the same for everything. You can't go anywhere. How do you get your food? How do you get anything? It makes no sense. Even other times when there are really strong flus, people still go out. People catch it. They don't get it. They get it. So far, the numbers of casualties of this virus are incredibly small all around the world, including China, where it was terrible. I think they had 6,000 maybe dead in all of China. For those who want to know, we've already had 60, 70,000 dead in the U.S. from the regular flu. That happens every year, somewhere between 20 and 60, 70,000. We have 50,000 dead from cold exposure. You know, it's a little insane what we're doing now for the numbers that we already have. We don't care about regular flus. Sure, it kills people. Who cares? Now, all of a sudden, everybody cares. I keep saying there's more to this than meets the eye because we're ruining economies for what? It doesn't make sense. But anyway, I'm getting off topic.
Yeah.
Let's go back to remote
No,
working.
I mean, but I think I mean, back in when I started work for UK government back in, 2003.
Mm-hmm.
So long time. What's that? 17 years ago.
Yeah.
I had a remote team then because we were implementing or trying to implement the use of learning technologies in schools, in further education colleges, what you call community education, and with work-based learning providers. And so we needed to have people all over the country. We needed, because, you know, there was a limit to how much traveling you could ask people to do. You couldn't get them to come into the office every day. They were based all over the country. So we used to have remote working. And one of the things that we used to do was we used to have check-in. So, you know, you emailed at the end of the day what you had been doing and what you'd achieved, who you'd seen, how it had gone, everything, and what your plans were for the next day. So it was, and then the next, you know, and then about maybe twice a week, once a week, we definitely had maybe even more individual phone calls with members of staff, just, you know, check in, how are things, how are you doing, what's your meeting, but, or, you know, how are your meetings going? But then once a week, we also had a regular meetup online, a regular call that we did online. And if we were able to do that 17 years ago, it must be even more possible to do it now. So that people shared that.
Oh, you're cutting out a little bit. Lesley, you've just cut out. Your audio.
I'll try.
Cut out.
I'll log in again.
There you go. I can hear you now. Your audio cut out.
I'll log in again.
Okay.
Am I back?
You're back now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But keeping in touch, keeping in touch with people was important.
Is key because people disappear very quickly. If they don't think anybody's watching or paying attention or we're collaborating with them, they may be gone or doing something else, and it's a lot hard. And we're talking mostly. You were working in a professional environment. let's talk other environments where they're not really professionals. They're people doing all sorts of other jobs and who require a lot of management. That's a different animal altogether, and
Yeah.
that makes it even more complex, harder to do because these people require a lot of supervision in-house. When they go off-site, it's even worse. It's just one of those things. Now, Harold, you've worked remotely for people, even
Yeah.
across countries. What were your experiences?
Well, so I would say well, yes, of course, communication kind of paramount in this. A lot of times, actually, when starting projects, I found it was helpful, if possible, to kind of start a project and basically be doing a screen share where we're seeing each other's screens, so I can explain, what I'm thinking, how I'm interpreting things, and making sure that I'm getting started on the right path, and they can see what I'm doing at the same time. And likewise, maybe I'm able to look at their notes or whatever they're doing. So just keeping really close communication, especially at the start of a project, I've found has been essential. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially in the media world,
But it's communication. But the communication skills, people also make the assumption that the communication skills are the same when you're managing remote workers or you're working remotely as they are when you're managing a team in an office. But what they forget is that the skills are actually slightly different, because at the moment we can see each other. So you can see not exactly the way it would be if I was sitting right next to you, because you can't get a feel of necessarily the body language all the time.
Right.
You can't get a feel. You can see a bit, but at the moment, the way the cameras are going, you can't see that I'm actually moving my hands.
Right.
For example.
Yeah. Which would be very bad if you were Italian.
Yeah, and I would say that also on the topic of communication, I feel like the way that you write emails has to be a bit different, because from what I found, emails, from both sides kind of have to be very clear. There has to be very little ambiguity in the emails, because as opposed to like working inside an office, then you can't, if there's something that's not quite clear about the email, it's where it would be easy in an office to just pop over and say, hey, what did you mean about this part or something? Then sometimes I might get an assignment and I can't get a hold of the person for another few hours or something, so I have to make sure that each thing is really explained, and when I get back, when I reply and stuff like that, I have to make sure to just really be clear about every point.
And that brings up another issue. When you're remote across time zones, now you have the issue of time. People are 1, 2, 3 or more hours away from you.
Or 7 hours like
or
we
7
are.
hours, yeah. And it requires more coordination, more awareness of people's time, and a little more thought going into when you talk to people. You try to make it, and again, if you're hiring people that are remote, you've got to be considerate of that remoteness, because they may not, you may show up at 8 in the morning, but it's 11 in the morning their time. And you're going, where are they? They're at lunch. Right, I forgot. Or it's 12. And the same goes for them. If they call you at 5 in the morning, you may not really want to be up at 5 in the morning. So there's all those little issues. And I'm actually, because we've been remote and we've worked with clients all over the country and some other countries, we have to be very time sensitive. And as a result, it's amazing how sensitive the clients are too. They say, well, we were going to do an 8 o'clock meeting, but that's really early your time. We'll move it. I go, you don't have to. We can get up early. But they're very sensitive to that, and which we appreciate, because it's a consideration everybody gives each other. But there's a lot. That's another trait, consideration. You try to consider the other person's time, when they do things, what they're doing. We've hired in the past many women who are mothers who want to work but they don't have, their kids are only gone maybe 2, 3 hours a day at school or preschool. And we've had a lot like that, and it hasn't been an issue with where they are, how we work together, how we work around schedules. And they're glad to be working, and we're glad to have them because, again, they're doing a good job. It's just that the time sometimes varies onto when you can expect something. And the other thing is, if you commit to something remotely, don't not do what you said, because there goes that trust. If you start saying, I'll have it by Friday, I'll have it by Monday, and it's not there because you have no idea where anybody is, the trust starts diminishing. You start getting worried. Where are they? What are we doing?
I mean, and while you're talking about trust, Rick, it's also worth mentioning that if you, especially at the moment when you're going to be getting husbands, wives, husbands, whatever, partners living together in the same house, and they then start hearing the other person in, your home partnership starts hearing the kind of relationship and the way that you talk to people that you work with can also have a huge impact, because they I remember at the time, the person I was living with was absolutely horrified that I had such a good friendship with so many people in the organization that I worked with. It was almost like a jealousy from his perspective. How can Lesley be talking to somebody like this? How can she sound so friendly? This is meant, she's meant to be the boss. She's to be what to do. But I was actually trying to build up with the people I was working with the remote workers, be they male, female, whatever. I was building up a solid relationship, trustworthy relationship with them. And he found that threatening. How can they be, Lesley's meant to be working, it's business. Why is she laughing?
That's funny.
Why is she joking when she's on the phone or on Skype to these people? So it can be, if you're going to get two people working from home, it can be threatening.
It can be. And he's no longer there, right?
No.
See, he was right. No, it's true, though. You make a really good point, because our work relationships have to be different many times from our personal relationships, and yet they can still be very friendly, very, you always try to keep a professional air, but you can also be very friendly, very tight with the people you work with, especially if you're on tight teams where you have to work together. The more you know each other, the more people get together and socialize, the closer and tighter that team is, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I used to have different members of my team, because they worked all over the country. Different members of my team actually, some of them used to come and stay over at my house. I had plenty of space, loads of space. They used to come and stay over. And what part of it that was lovely was that my children then actually got to know them. And so my children ended up building a relationship with these people. Or if we were, if I was meeting somewhere and they were going to be in the area that I was in, and I was already going out with the children, I would say, oh, we're going to go and meet up for so-and-so for dinner. And I would say to, whichever child happened to be at home at the time, because by that stage, they were in their 20s, I would say, oh, come and join us. So my children actually got to meet some of my work colleagues that they might not have gotten to meet otherwise.
Right.
And again, that can actually I'm not saying that will happen now when everybody's, not talking. Everybody's going to be socially, or they are talking, but they're going to be socially isolated. But at the end of this process, Rick, at the end of it, what then happens? Do you go back to exactly the way you were before? Or has the relationship changed?
That we don't know. Yeah, it's going to be
Well,
interesting.
you've managed remote teams. Remote teams.
In our case, whether they've been in-house or remote, it seems to be about the same, the way we treat people and the way they treat back. So when we see them personally, it's like seeing an old friend you haven't seen in a while. It's just a good feeling. Yeah. And for example, there's a couple that we've worked with now for 22 years, I think. 22 years they've been remote, both of them. I think she came on a little bit later, maybe 15 years. But he was on since about 97, 98, I think 98. We've had another gal who's another instructional designer. She's been with us about 12 years, and we've known her for almost 20. We have other people that we've worked remote with that we've known for 16, 17, 18 years. So we've had very long-term relationships with remote people. And there's a friendship and there's a professional relationship, and they work well. They work well. And we've hired temporary people here and there that sometimes we have people in-house, which is good too. And then we have a certain amount that's, we call it outhouse, but basically not in-house. And now we tend to have the media folks in-house only because we find that it's easier to communicate. It's easier to do checks and reviews and everything with media because so much in media is subjective and so much is depending on what a client may want, what they may not want. And it would take a little longer to get that done remotely. And we also like having people in-house. It's fun to have people here and to basically all get along. One thing we've been doing for a long time, even when we've had quite a bit more, we don't have as many people now as we used to, but even when we had like 20-something people in-house, we tended to have a lot of lunches in-house in a big conference room, and everybody got together and we chatted. We also had a big lunchroom in one of the suites we had, and it was great. We would always just get together and have chats, and it was just a lot of fun. We from talking about different things to lunch and learns to whatever we were doing. It was a way to keep people closer and to try to get people to get along. Didn't always work. Some people don't want to get along that well, but for the most part, it tended to work.
But how do you recreate that?
Very hard
in a remote environment, because what you're describing, what you're describing to me is something that that used to happen in our offices. Mm-hmm. That was something that was, Friday lunchtime. Yep. Mm-hmm. That was a regular time that we did it. Yeah. How do you? It's also important when people start working remotely to find a way to recreate that in some way, because that is what builds a bond.
It does. And it's difficult. That part's a little more difficult, especially if everybody's so far apart from each other. I'll give you an example. We have one person in San Diego, two in Toronto. We've got other ones that are on the East Coast and the South. It's really hard to get everybody together at the same time. And in fact, for example, one of them we have not seen personally in probably 16, 17 years. And yet,
goodness, I've seen you sooner then.
Yeah, it's just
you and I've met more.
I know
recently.
We've actually met sooner than that. It's amazing, because we've never had a chance to go to Toronto in a long time, and every time we're thinking of going, something comes up and we don't go. So it's one of those things. But they're mature. They know we have a relationship regardless, and they feel the same way. So even though you don't see each other, when you do see each other, it's just like good old times. And that's, I think, part of it. We tend to have, for example, a yearly And we haven't gone as far as fly people in, partly because it gets pretty expensive to do that. We're not a huge company. But ideally, if we were a bigger company, I'd fly people in, like have a Christmas party and just get everybody together and have a good time and spend a week out here. But yeah, that costs quite a bit more money, but it can be done. And I know companies do that when they have remote workers. They maybe once to 3 times a year fly them places where they can all be together. They have workouts together. They do things. And that's good. That's a good way to keep people closer, keep the relationship going.
So what about Harold, to bring Harold back in? Harold, this is, what's going on now is relatively new to you. You haven't been through this, you haven't been through anything like this before, and you're obviously a little bit younger than Rick and I. So what's your view on it? What are you looking for from managers, from senior teams, to make you feel that remote working is, you feel valued?
I think it's just as I said, it's having frequent communication and feeling like when feeling like the communication's going both ways is really the most important thing. I think really, it's just because
Sorry, I've put you on the spot there, Harold.
No, it's a good question though. I'm thinking,
And just for the record, more often than not, Harold's in-house. So we have him here a lot. He does some other contract work every so often outside, but and Harold's also very responsible. He's one of those guys, he's disciplined. He comes in, he does his job, he likes to do it. And we have our moments we'll screw around a lot, but on the other hand, we get things done.
And I think what
Harold also has to deal with an awful lot of people, like all your guests who come on. Mm-hmm. Harold is dealing with them all remotely. For example, I've been doing this show for quite a while now, and Harold and I, I've met you and Lesley, Rick, but I've never met Harold.
Right.
We've only ever dealt remotely, and yet I think we're friends.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. Yeah. The thing is, I guess, growing up in the time that I did, I've always been sort of used to having a lot of the people I only know online, and there's a lot of people I know online that I've actually never seen in person. So in a lot of ways, I think that's just something that feels natural to me and people of my generation. I'm not sure, I'm sure it's become natural for people that were born in previous generations as well, because it has been that way for quite a while. But
also you bring up a good point, Harold, because, and we've talked about this all the time, like for example in my case, I have more friends online remote than I do locally. And we're all really good friends, and you go, it really kind of sucks that you can't see your friends all the time. You can see them live, not live at least. And, it's fun to see people online, but it's just a lot nicer to see people in real life. And I think a lot of us more and more are getting into that situation of having friends that are remote. So you don't get to see your friends that often, maybe sometimes, but maybe not. One of my good friends is in Australia, and we met online on Twitter, and we happen to be in the same group of eLearning guys. And I was doing a talk in Learning Solutions in Florida. He happened to be there, and we finally met in person. And we've become very good friends ever since. He even co-hosts a show with us. And he always says, there's something bitter about this, because you're friends that you can't see all the time and you want to. He came over to our house. He stayed with us like maybe 3-4 times already. And one of the times he stayed with us, here we are with two, 50-year-old guys sitting on the floor, legs spread open, playing with gear. We're like little babies, playing with toys, except we have very expensive toys. We're playing with microphones. Hey, have you seen this mic? And hey, take a look at this camera. This is cool. And my wife, Lesley, walks by and just goes, huh. Shakes her head and keeps going. She goes, we look like two kids. She goes, you look like 10-year-olds. And then we have these big reflectors that you can pop open. You've probably seen those. And when you pop it open, it's hard to get them back in the same exact position. And we had one here, again, two 50-something-year-olds. We both manage people and do things. And we're going, how the heck do you get this back? And we're doing all sorts of stuff. After about 25 minutes, Lesley, my wife, walks by and gives me a YouTube video of this 12-year-old girl doing the same thing in 1 second. It's like, dun, dun, done. And we're like, oh, God, we're so unworthy. But it was fun. It was a bonding moment between two guys who couldn't figure what the heck they were doing out. And then we did, and we got it, and we didn't get hurt in the process. That was good.
So to pick you up on that then, Rick, so then if people are remote working, so if people are actually doing this and remote working, should we also then be encouraging our remote workers to share things like that?
Oh, absolutely.
To share experiences.
Yes.
So that they actually build a bond, they build the friendship, they build the communication.
Yep, absolutely.
So
because
it then becomes, it's not just all work.
No. There's a lot of storytelling.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
That's right. And I've been known with our people to talk a lot sometimes, and I'm telling stories all the time. I've been around long enough to have a lot of stories, and they do the same thing. We like telling the stories, and frankly, most of them are writers, so they like storytelling. And so we relate experiences. We talk about things we've gone through. Oh, that was a pain. This is good. This is fun. This isn't. And that's how you share. It's just like instead of being at a water cooler at lunch, you're just sharing over the phone or over a conference call or Skype or whatever you do. And I try to be disciplined with my friends that are remote to try to have Skype meetings more often than not, just to say hi. And not to mention, the people we work with. It doesn't always work out because just the time differences are tough. And of course, you get to the end of the week and sometimes everybody's too tired to do anything. It's like, we'll do it next time. And that happens too. But it's always good to try to keep in touch, get more personal, talk about things, relay experiences, and then work together. It's amazing what you can get done. If people think they're on the same team, then they're on the same team. But if they think they're not, then they become distanced. They don't care as much, and that breaks the teams up. So you're right. There's a lot of little things.
I think it's also up to the people that are leading. So to go back to sort of finish up, because I know we're overrunning slightly.
We're almost done. Yep.
Yeah, but I think it's therefore really important for the people that are leading these teams of absolutely new remote workers.
That's tough.
That their job is to actually grow trust within these teams. And that will involve a slightly different way of communicating, which might actually benefit them all when work returns to normal.
That's true, because all of a sudden they get used to communicating. And that's a good thing. Well, for all you people watching, give us your feedback. Get involved in the conversation on the comments below. Let us know what you think. I gather nobody was in the chat room today?
Oh, I forgot to open it up today.
Okay, so we may have had somebody in the chat room.
I'm not, Harold, I'm not surprised. It's complete and utter. I did try to get, I did try to get various guests on today, but in the UK, it's just complete and utter madness.
It is. I've been watching the BBC on YouTube, and you're right. I've watched everything. The Prime Minister, everybody just going through a lot of conversations about what's going on, and they're prepping people for it may take a year. I'm going, a year? There won't be a UK
or
in
18
a year.
months, some of them.
I know, it's insane. So 18 months, the whole country dies. You don't die of the virus, you die of starvation from not working. I guess there's one way to kill you off, but insanity is insanity. The problem with insanity is if everybody starts believing it, then we're all insane and it's good. No. Question. Don't assume everybody's doing anything right, and politicians have no clue usually. And they're not always given good advice by other people in political positions. So just keep that in mind.
Before we finish, let me just read you something.
Yeah.
So when I was when my father, I think I told you, was a very top businessman in the UK. He ran one of the biggest insurance brokers in the world, and he left me a little plaque, which this is the little plaque that he left me. And it says, "We the willing, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We have done so much for so long with so little. We are now qualified to do anything with nothing."
Wow. That's very good.
That's pretty good.
That's very good. Hey, can you send us that as a copy? Not a copy, but just the verbiage. I think we should post that one out. That's a really good one. It's so true.
And he had it, my father had that sitting when he was running this huge multi-million pound company. He had that sitting on his desk.
That's classic. I used to have one on my desk. I don't know what happened to it, but it said, "Please pay us so we can pay them and they can pay you."
But that one, I'll send you a copy of that one, because I think that one, particularly at the moment with what we're all going through, is just perfect.
Yep, that's a good one. Yep, led by the unknowing.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Hey,
Take
everyone,
care then,
have a good one. And guys, stay calm out there. This will pass like anything else. Think of it as a kidney stone. I've never had one, but I heard they're painful. This is a kidney stone in life that we're all going through. And with any luck, it'll come out.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, take care, everyone. We'll see you next week on eLearnChat. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
That was a very good plaque. And we're done.